Hello! Right then, so yesterday was the hip assessment, and that's kind of going to be an ongoing thing, right? Because everything that we're going to be doing, you want hip mobility. So we've talked about, I've banged on about this in the past, but if you're kind of new to what I'm all about using movement as a way of either alleviating aches, pains, niggles, problems, injuries, or preventing them in the first place. Can't prevent them entirely, but you can go a little way into helping your body be better able to deal with the shit that life throws at us, whether that's just in life or whether it's in running. All good. So your hips, yes, they need to be mobile. You need flexibility around the muscles and the tendons and so on around the hips, but you also need the strength then to control the movement that goes on there. And because, like I said yesterday, there's an awful lot goes on at the hips. You've got your glutes. They're supposed to be these huge, biggest muscles in the body, driving you forward, particularly when you're running. Hamstrings coming down the back of the thigh, again, there to help you run. But they're also there, all those muscles are there to stabilize your pelvis. So if you think about your pelvis as being the center of your being, if you like, and a lot of what can go wrong in the body comes from the inability to control what's going on at the pelvis. That can lead to things like hip pain, lower back pain, etc., and all sorts of other stuff. So the biggies are, really, for me, always, what are your hips doing, what are your shoulders doing, and what are your spine doing. The feet and ankles, I have a big thing about feet and ankles because they do have a knock-on effect up into the body. But in terms of the big three that you can have a big impact on, the hips, the spine and the shoulders are obviously the three major points, right? So today, we're going to look at an exercise that I use a lot. If you've been doing any of my strength and mobility sessions, you'll see me use this exercise all the time. You can load it up with kettlebell or dumbbell or barbell, but it's really useful even just doing it on its own. It's one of those exercises that's self-limiting. In other words, if you can't do it, you can't do it. Doesn't matter what I say, how I try and coach you through it, your body will turf you out of the exercise if you're not capable of doing it. For that reason, I'm doing a modified version as well today, so you can have a play with it. And I'll explain as I go through why it's useful. So, just looking at why I don't have all the lights on, bear with me. There we go. Just looking at the full exercise to start with. If I was to do an unloaded single leg deadlift, it would look something like this. There's lots of different ways of doing it. This is the way I like to do it. One leg goes behind, I'm nice and upright. And if you imagine that I am like a seesaw, I've got somebody sat on my head, somebody sat on my foot, and my pivot point is my hips. My head and my foot travel at the same time. So I'm keeping my left leg straight, and I'm bringing my foot up as my chest comes over. I'm controlling that movement all the way back up. And so it looks like the work is being done on this side, the side that's moving, in this case my right side. But really, I'm going to turn around so you can see my left leg, the work is a standing leg, right? So when you're running particularly, running is just a series of one-legged or single leg balances, just performed one after the other. So when you land, and when you're when you land and the foot progresses underneath you, you need all the balance and stability on that side, the control, right? So we want control over our movements. So again, on this side, head and chest moving at the same time, head, chest and foot moving at the same time, balancing on one leg. This leg is staying absolutely straight. Now, if you are somebody who's hypermobile, whose leg bends the other way, you might want to put a slight bend in it, just so it is actually straight, but for the rest of us, you want a straight leg. And the idea is the work is felt in this glute. So if you can hold it, like I'm trying to do, and talk at the same time, which isn't the easiest thing in the world, you should find that the glute on the left, so the standing leg, totally fires up, and you feel a load of work in this standing leg, and then coming back up. So you've got your big glute muscle at the back, glute maximus. which is involved in hip extension, so taking your leg behind you, yeah, that's that big muscle at the back. And then we've got the smaller stuff at the side, which is all about balance and stability. So hitting both really. So coming over again, just to show you, this leg stays nice and straight. What I'm not doing is using my spine. So it's not this. Yeah, it's a hip hinge. There's nothing wrong with flexing your spine. Your spine should be able to move through all its range of movement as well, but we're focusing on the hips. So if we're focusing on the hips, we want to work the hips, not the spine in this case. So the modified version then is using, it can be a countertop, table, work surface, whatever you've got, doesn't really matter, just using the chair for now, is put your hands on the chair, you walk your legs away, slightly so you can see my shape. Walk the legs away. Doesn't matter particularly how far over you come. You just want to be in a position where you can maintain the natural, I'm going to call it the natural curve of your spine. In other words, what you're not doing is this. So I'm not rounding my spine, and you're going to find it, some of you will find it difficult to know when you've bent over whether you've rounded your spine to get there, okay? My suggestion is always get in front of a mirror or get it videoed, because pointless doing this stuff if you're not in the right position, all right? So I would cue it as lift your tailbone, yeah? So if you can see that, I'm gonna come here so my spine's against the white. So you can see I'm rounded there, yeah? So if I lift my tailbone, it looks like that. So all I'm doing is putting I'm putting it in quotations because I hate the word natural curvature of my spine, whatever that is, right? So normal and natural, yeah, total bollocks. Anyway, so coming back out, have your hands on, you can have your forearms on, it doesn't matter. This is all staying put. So now I don't have to worry about balance, yeah? I'm hoping you can see that my legs are vertical there. So I'm not here and I'm not here. My legs are kind of straight up to the floor, or vertical to the floor. And then you choose a leg and you take the other one out behind. So remember, it's not this leg, the floating leg, it's not that leg that's doing the work, okay? It's the standing leg. So I'm not overly concerned by how high this leg comes up. But it shouldn't, as it comes up, it shouldn't make you arch your spine anymore. Yeah, so take it up only as far as you can cope with it. And then, again, you're starting to feel the work on the standing leg. So for those of you that have been working with me for a while and you've got your balance sorted and all the rest of it, this is actually a good option just to work out whether you do actually cheat by lifting your floating hip away, right? So for most of us, or many of us, when we do this exercise, the cheat will be the leg comes out, that's all fine, but to pick the leg up off the floor, you actually pick the hip up as well. And you can play with that movement, right? So once you've got the leg up, you feel the work in the standing glute. I've got that, it's definitely working. My left leg is straight. Now if I lift my hip up, it alters the sensation. In fact, the further up I lift my hip, the less I'm glute activating, for want of a better way of putting it, right? So if you think about your hip bones on the front of your pelvis, you want to point those to the floor. And if you're in any doubt whatsoever, point them to the floor even more, and you'll probably find that the standing leg suddenly gets very, very engaged glute-wise. And then you take a quick look at your standing leg, and the other thing you'll notice is that it might have kind of poked out to the side. So the other cheat is not just to lift this hip up, it's to shift your hips out to the side. So can you bring that leg back to vertical? And I'm just hanging out here, I'm not doing anything, I'm hanging out, and it becomes then an isometric, no, it's not a movement, is it? An isometric exercise for the glutes on the standing leg. So isometric just means that you're working but there's no movement. And then you can switch sides. So I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to check my legs vertical, I'm going to take the other leg away, I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to make sure that I'm not, and you can see what I'm doing with my pelvis there. My pelvis wants to do this. I'm coming back down to square. So if I had a glass of water on my sacrum, so my butt, you know, the big bony bit between your butt cheeks, the glass of water wouldn't fall off. as it would if I was either lifting my pelvis, rounding my pelvis, or shifting my leg out to the side. Yeah. So this is a great exercise for strengthening the outer hip muscles of glute medius and this kind of stuff here, the balance kind of stuff. So for those of you who were talking about having this pain at the side of the hip, especially when you lie down, it's a good option for strengthening, better than clams, but I'll go through that in more detail. So I'm just holding at the moment, yeah, and if you're working along with me or if you're watching and laughing, that's fine, but otherwise I'm just holding. And then I'm going to switch legs again, and I'm going to try and demonstrate. I like doing this. So for all I've just said, when you come over, you don't want your pelvis to shift. You don't. You want to practice making sure that your pelvis stays level as you lift that back leg. But by the same token, it's a good thing to strengthen the muscles by having control over where your pelvis is in space. In other words, so what my movement is going to look like is I'm going to push down into the floor with the standing leg and lift my pelvis up on the opposite side. And then I'm going to lower it back so it's back to square. I'm going to lift it up and lower it back down. I'm going to try and shift this so I can show you on this side. So there I am square to the floor. I'm pushing down into this leg, not out, down, to lift this side of my pelvis up and then lowering it back down. So it looks like my leg's lifting and lowering, which technically it is, but it's only because it's attached to my pelvis. The movement is coming from me having my hip bones, so two lasers pointing down towards the floor, and then shifting and my lasers pointing out to the side. Pointing down to the floor, pointing out to the side, pointing down to the floor, pointing out to the side. So there's not a rotation at the spine. I'm not twisting at the spine. I'm making this leg and my pelvis do the work, and you should find that the glutes on the standing side really fire up and get a little bit of a workout. You can obviously do this without holding on, which takes it to a whole different level. Or you can go nice and light, like I can do this with just fingertips, and it makes it a lot more painful in a good way. And then rest when you need to. You should find that fires things up nicely. I'm just going to do the other side one here. So if you need the balance, if you need the support for balance, do that. And then as you get better at it, use less balance until you don't need it at all, which is actually quite difficult, or it is for me this morning. And then you've got the whole thing, which is to practice stay nice and upright, standing legs straight, body moving as one unit. Arms can hang. But until you've got your balance sorted out, you're kind of wasting your time a little bit. Unless you're training balance, right? So if you're training balance or you want to work balance, then by all means wobble all over the place. If you're wanting to hit the hips and the glutes and the muscles around the hips in getting the most bang for your buck, you want to take the balance out of it to start with, right? So find a position where you can do the exercise and the movement, get the work in the glutes, and then add the balance in afterwards. What else with that one? When you practice it without the chair or a wall or etc., it really does highlight what your balance is like, right? So the question, can you balance on one leg? If the answer to that is no, then you know that every step that you take when you're running, when you stood on one leg, there is an element of you not being balanced in that position for whatever reason, whether it's sort of inner ear, that kind of stuff. But usually it's your body not knowing where it is in space, not getting the feedback, and you need to work on your balance. And that end of the lecture for today.